Did you ever stop and think how many toxic 1980s products we lived with that are now forbidden? These 1980s products were everyday things we used, trusted, and never imagined could quietly harm us. So what hidden dangers were sitting in our homes long before anyone warned us? When you think back to the 1980s, aerosol spray paint felt like one of those everyday marvels that made everything brighter and bolder. But behind that colorful cloud was something far more dangerous, because the pigments inside many of those cans were made with lead-based compounds, and that single detail changed everything. People used it without blinking an eye, coating bicycles, toys, school projects, and even furniture in a haze of neon charm. The funny thing is that the smell alone should have been a clue, because it lingered far longer than anything harmless should parents let kids help with art projects, shaking the can proudly and watching their creations come to life, unaware that tiny particles drifting in the air could quietly settle into lungs, carpets, and skin. Once scientists connected the dots between this kind of paint and serious health damage, the entire outlook changed overnight. Homes were suddenly filled with things that now came with whispered warnings instead of praise. Even simple crafts became symbols of an era that did not yet understand how dangerous its brightest ideas could be. And when regulators finally stepped in, the shock was real, because no one expected something so ordinary to carry that kind of hidden cost. In the 1980s, baby toys made from polyvinyl chloride softened with dangerous phthalates looked harmless, colorful, and cheerful, the kind of toys parents trusted without a second thought. Babies chewed on them, squeezed them, and carried them everywhere, and no one questioned what made the plastic so flexible or what happened when tiny teeth left marks behind. The truth was that the softeners inside those toys could leach out, especially when exposed to saliva, sunlight, or the kind of wear that came from being a child's constant companion. Parents had no idea that something so simple could carry long-term risks. Playpens, nurseries, and diaper bags were filled with these toys, each one marketed as safe, modern, and designed with comfort in mind. It took years before health researchers fully understood the hormonal dangers connected to those chemical softeners. By then, millions of homes had already cycled through dozens of these toys without knowing the consequences. When the bans came, they arrived with unsettling clarity, revealing that even the gentlest-looking items could hide risks you would never expect. And that realization shaped an entire generation's view of what safe for children truly meant. Electric hair dryers in the 1980s were considered one of the great conveniences of the modern world, sleek devices that made mornings faster and easier. But many of them hid something far more troubling inside, because the heating cores in certain models were lined with asbestos, a material whose dangers were not widely known to ordinary families. People held these dryers inches from their faces, breathing in warm air that sometimes carried microscopic fibers no one realized were harmful. Parents even used them to warm baby blankets or dry a child's hair after a bath. It seemed like progress at the time, a little piece of luxury woven into daily routines. But when researchers uncovered the risks, the truth spread quickly and created a wave of concern that rippled through households everywhere. Suddenly, a trusted bathroom tool became a symbol of how easily danger could hide in plain sight. Families tossed out dryers they had relied on for years, all while wondering what they had unknowingly inhaled. The shift came hard and fast, turning a familiar hum into a warning that echoed across an entire decade. During the 1980s, urea formaldehyde foam insulation was promoted as an energy-saving breakthrough, something homeowners could proudly use to seal drafts and cut heating bills. It sounded perfect for an era obsessed with modern upgrades. But once installed, the insulation began releasing formaldehyde gas, especially in warm, enclosed spaces. Families noticed headaches, watery eyes, and strange odors long before anyone realized the cause. Contractors praised it for being affordable and easy to apply, so it spread quickly through suburban neighborhoods that trusted every promise of new comfort. And in those early days, no one imagined that their walls were slowly releasing something unsafe into the air. They breathed every single day, When reports finally surfaced, the revelation was devastating, forcing homeowners to rip out insulation they had only recently paid to install. Regulators moved in, safety warnings mounted, and a product once meant to protect people from the cold instead became one of the decade's most unsettling missteps. It was a harsh lesson in how innovation can sometimes hide real danger behind its shiny promises. In the 1980s, asbestos brake pads were everywhere, tucked quietly into family cars without anyone giving them a second glance. Parents drove carpools, grocery runs, and summer trips with complete trust in the parts meant to keep them safe. But the friction that made those pads effective also released asbestos dust, coating nearby components and sometimes lingering on hands or clothes after routine maintenance. Mechanics breathed it in daily, wiping their hands on rags and leaning over opened wheels without realizing the stakes. Families had no idea that every stop, turn, and brake produced tiny particles that could drift into garages or stick to tools. When science exposed the truth, the reaction was swift and unsettling. The pads were banned, replaced, and buried under layers of new regulations designed to protect future generations. But even today, the memory of that discovery sits heavy, a reminder that even the parts of life meant to protect us can sometimes do the opposite. Paraquat weed killer was a staple in 1980s hardware stores, sold in bright bottles that promised fast results for stubborn weeds. Home gardeners used it liberally on lawns, driveways, and vegetable beds, unaware that a single accidental sip or a splash on skin carried life-threatening risks. The chemical acted quickly, burning plants down to their roots, and homeowners saw that as efficiency rather than a warning. People poured it into sprayers without gloves, mixed it into diluted solutions, and stored it in sheds that were far too easy for children to access. It took years of medical reports and research before the gravity of paraquat exposure fully surfaced. Once it did, regulators moved decisively, banning or restricting the product across the country. Families looked back and realized they had handled something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. What once felt like a convenient fix for weekend yard work became one of the clearest symbols of how toxic the decade's quick solutions could be. Pesticide foggers containing chlordane were marketed as miracle solutions for basement pests and household infestations in the 1980s. With one press of a button, homes filled with a chemical fog that settled into carpets, walls, and clothing. Parents used them confidently, believing they were doing the right thing to protect their families from insects and rodents. But chlordane lingered far longer than anyone realized, clinging to indoor surfaces and circulating through household air systems. Researchers eventually found that prolonged exposure could cause serious harm, turning a once trusted product into a public health concern. By the time regulators intervened, countless families had already filled their homes with chemical residue that would not disappear easily. The trust people placed in those bright canisters now feels painfully misplaced, a reminder that even the most well-intentioned household habits can carry hidden costs. Aerosol carpet cleaners containing benzene were popular in the 1980s because they promised instant freshness with minimal effort. A few sprays, a little scrubbing, and carpets looked brand new. But benzene, a known carcinogen, lingered in the air long after the foam disappeared. Families used these cleaners weekly, sometimes daily, especially in homes with pets or children. The smell was sharp, almost chemical sweet, but in the 80s people trusted anything sold in bright cans with cheerful branding. Over time, scientists uncovered the link between benzene exposure and blood-related illnesses, sparking alarm in households that had relied on these cleaners for years. The ban came with a jolt, forcing families to rethink not just what they cleaned their homes with, but what they allowed into their air. The product that once symbolized cleanliness instead became a haunting reminder of how easily toxins can masquerade as convenience. Household drain cleaners containing sodium hydroxide pellets were considered the heavy-duty heroes of the 1980s. Kitchen and bathroom people loved how the pellets hissed and steamed when water hit them, as if tough clogs were surrendering on the spot. But sodium hydroxide, once mixed, caused burns on contact, releasing fumes harsh enough to sting eyes and throats. Kids often stood nearby out of curiosity, watching the reaction without knowing the danger. Homeowners kept these cleaners under sinks, within easy reach of small hands, never imagining that a single handful of spilled pellets could cause serious injury. When incidents began to mount, regulators stepped in, banning the most dangerous formulations. Families were left to reconsider the tools they trusted to keep their homes running smoothly. And in hindsight, the idea that something so potent was ever sold for everyday use feels shocking, almost reckless. Mothballs made with pure naphthalene were common in closets and drawers throughout the 1980s. Their sharp, unmistakable smell drifted through coats, blankets, and storage chests, signaling that clothes would stay protected from pests. But naphthalene vapor, especially in enclosed spaces, posed dangers few families understood at the time. People placed these little white spheres everywhere, believing the smell alone meant their belongings were safe. Children found them fascinating and sometimes handled them out of curiosity, unaware that even touching or breathing near them carried real risks. Studies eventually connected prolonged exposure to respiratory and blood-related problems, sparking concern across entire neighborhoods. When the bans and regulations arrived, they arrived with the weight of hard evidence. Suddenly, those tiny spheres, once associated with tidiness and practicality, became symbols of a decade that trusted chemicals far more than it should have. Their legacy lingers as a reminder that not everything designed to protect us truly does. Spray-on flea treatments containing organophosphate chemicals were one of those everyday items people trusted without hesitation. In the 1980s, pet owners sprayed them on dogs, cats, and even living room carpets, believing they were protecting their homes from pests. What they did not realize was that organophosphate residue absorbed through skin and lingered in the air long after the spraying stopped. Families breathed it in, pets licked it off their fur, and children played on carpets that were still coated with a chemical haze no one could see. For many people, the strong smell meant the treatment was working, not that it might be dangerous. It took years for health experts to connect the dots between these products and serious neurological concerns, and when those findings surfaced, the shock hit hard, because these sprays felt like such a normal part of household routines. Suddenly, something used out of love for pets turned into a warning about how easily safety could be misunderstood. Regulators moved in, restrictions tightened, and families who once relied on these sprays now looked back with a mixture of disbelief and worry. It was a reminder that even the habits made out of care can sometimes carry risks no one ever expected. In the 1980s, pediatric cold medicines packed with banned stimulants sat proudly on pharmacy shelves, wrapped in colorful labels that promised fast relief for sniffles and congestion. Parents gave them freely to children, trusting the cheerful branding and familiar logos. What most families did not know was that many of these medicines contained powerful stimulants capable of increasing heart rate, disrupting sleep, and causing unexpected behavioral changes. Kids took them before school, before bedtime, or any time a cold lingered too long, often with no idea that the relief came with risks far greater than anyone realized. These medicines were considered modern tools of convenience, the kind of thing every parent had in the bathroom cabinet. But over time, pediatricians and researchers uncovered the darker side of those ingredients. When the truth surfaced, the shock was immediate, because something so widely trusted suddenly felt like a threat hiding in plain sight. The bans arrived with firm clarity, and families rushed to replace medicines they had relied on for years. Looking back, it feels almost surreal that such strong ingredients made their way into products meant for the youngest and most vulnerable. And it stands as a reminder that not everything marketed as gentle truly is. Kids in the 1980s adored sticker kits, especially the ones that came with their own glue made from toluene-based solvents. The colors were bright, the patterns fun, and the excitement of crafting felt completely innocent, but inside each bottle of glue was a chemical strong enough to cause dizziness, nausea, and long-term neurological concerns when inhaled. Children used these kits on bedroom floors, classroom desks, and library tables, often leaning close as they brushed on the sweet-smelling adhesive. Parents and teachers rarely questioned the scent, assuming all craft supplies were harmless by default. Kids believed the smell meant the glue was high quality. Over time, reports surfaced about the effects of prolonged exposure, and it became clear that these kits were far more dangerous than anyone imagined. By the time regulators stepped in, countless children had used them in ways that now feel unnerving to remember. The bans came swiftly, replacing these adhesives with safer alternatives that lacked the signature smell older generations still recall. And today, these once beloved sticker sets stand as a reminder of how easily danger can hide inside the most cheerful childhood memories. Rubber cement was a staple in 1980s school supply packs, a bottle that every child recognized by its sharp scent and stringy texture. The moment the cap twisted off, the smell filled the room, drifting across desks and lingering through entire art classes. What few people realized was that the solvent inside some rubber cement formulas posed serious risks, especially when used in closed spaces without ventilation. Kids brushed it on posters, construction paper, and cardboard, often waving the papers around as the adhesive dried into invisible fumes. Teachers treated it as a normal craft supply, unaware that tiny daily exposures could add up over time. The chemical inside made the glue spread smoothly and dry quickly, but it also carried risks that became impossible to ignore as research evolved. When restrictions finally arrived, they were met with real concern because so many children had used bottles of this adhesive without a second thought. Parents reevaluated school supplies, classrooms switched to safer alternatives, and the old bottles became relics of a decade that assumed convenience alone meant safety. Today, rubber cement serves as a quiet reminder that even the simplest school essentials can hide dangers we only understand much later. Plastic lunchboxes lined with asbestos, strengthened panels were popular in the 1980s because they were durable, colorful, and built to survive schoolyard chaos. Parents bought them believing they were sturdy enough for daily use, never suspecting what was sealed inside the hard plastic walls. Asbestos fibers helped reinforce the panels, improving heat resistance and strength, but they also introduced risks no parent would knowingly accept. Kids carried these lunchboxes everywhere, bumping them against tables, dropping them on playgrounds, and placing them on cafeteria trays without knowing that damage or aging could potentially release something unsafe. The characters and designs on the outside made them feel fun and harmless, almost like toys disguised as food containers. It was not until later that researchers uncovered the full scope of the danger the bans followed, and families quickly discarded items they had once cherished. Looking back, it is unsettling to realize that something meant to hold sandwiches and snacks carried risks hidden behind colorful paint. And today, these lunchboxes serve as a symbol of how even the most ordinary childhood objects can harbor secrets no one ever imagined. In the 1980s, children's jewelry kits filled with cadmium-coated beads were marketed as creative, hands-on fun. Kids spent afternoons stringing necklaces, making bracelets, and proudly wearing their creations to school. But inside those shiny beads was cadmium, a metal known today for its toxic effects, especially when handled frequently or placed in mouths. Children touched these beads constantly, sometimes even biting them to check their texture. The metallic finish felt smooth and exciting, and no one thought twice about how it was made. Parents loved these kits because they encouraged creativity and kept kids busy during long weekends or rainy days. When researchers later uncovered the dangers of cadmium exposure, the findings rattled families who suddenly questioned something so beloved. Regulators stepped in, bans were issued, and manufacturers scrambled to redesign their products. These once cherished craft kits now stand as a warning that beauty and danger can sometimes come wrapped in the same glittering package, and they remind us that childhood hobbies are not always as harmless as they appear. Lead crystal baby drinking cups were prized gifts in the 1980s, often given at baby showers or christenings with a sense of tradition and elegance. The sparkling glass seemed refined, something families believed would be treasured for years. But the lead inside these cups could leach into liquids, especially warm drinks, creating a risk no parent would knowingly accept. Many families proudly displayed these cups or even used them for special occasions, unaware of the danger. Some babies drank juice or milk from them, while adults admired the craftsmanship without questioning the material. It took years before researchers made the connection clear, and once they did, the truth spread quickly. The bans followed, and these once precious keepsakes became hazardous heirlooms tucked away in storage boxes. Looking back, it is unsettling to realize how something meant to symbolize love and tradition could conceal such risk. And today, these cups serve as a reminder that beauty sometimes hides dangers we only discover long after the memories are made. Aluminum cookware coated with unregulated nonstick surfaces was a quiet staple in 1980s kitchens, the kind of cookware parents used for everything from morning eggs to late-night leftovers. These pans promised easy cleaning and quick cooking, which seemed like a miracle to busy households. But the coating on many early nonstick surfaces could break down at high heat, releasing fumes that posed real dangers when inhaled families cooked with them daily, unaware that scratches and heat damage made the coatings unstable. Parents relied on these pans for convenience, thinking they represented the best of modern kitchen technology. But as research emerged, the chemicals inside the coatings became a serious concern. Regulators stepped in, families replaced their cookware, and manufacturers raced to create safer alternatives. People began to rethink what they trusted in their kitchens, realizing that convenience alone could not outweigh hidden risks. And today, these old pans serve as another reminder that progress sometimes comes with costs no one sees until much later. In the 1980s, disposable contact lenses felt like a revolution, offering comfort and clarity without the constant cleaning routine older lenses required. But many early versions used mercury-based preservatives in their storage solutions, a detail most users never knew. People put these lenses in their eyes daily, trusting that anything sold in an optical store must be completely safe. The truth, however, was that repeated exposure to mercury-based solutions posed risks to eye health and overall well-being. Users reported irritation, dryness, or discomfort, but few connected these symptoms to the preservative itself. When researchers uncovered the connection, the findings created a wave of concern across the industry. Bans followed, and safer alternatives replaced the old formulas quickly. Looking back, it seems shocking that something meant to enhance vision carried such hidden danger. And it reinforces the idea that innovation sometimes arrives before safety fully catches up. Glow dust craft powders were the kind of novelty that defined the 1980s. Bright neon powders that lit up bracelets, posters, and school projects. Kids loved the magic of watching their artwork shine in the dark, and parents thought it was just harmless fun. But some early glow dust formulas used low-level radioactive materials to achieve that luminous effect. Children dipped their fingers into the powders, blew them across posters, and sprinkled them onto outfits for parties and school events. The glowing effect felt futuristic and exciting, a little piece of science fiction brought into the real world. But when health experts uncovered the source of the glow, everything changed. Regulators banned these powders quickly, replacing them with safer, non-radioactive alternatives. Families who had once celebrated this trendy craft now looked back with a mix of nostalgia and discomfort. And glow dust became one of the starkest examples of how the decades' love for novelty sometimes outpaced common sense. In the 1980s, decorative clock radios made from crushed natural stone looked like the height of modern style, a perfect blend of nature and technology sitting right beside your bed. The idea was simple. Take powdered mineral stone, bind it together, shape it into a sleek shell, and build a clock into it that felt earthy and futuristic at the same time. But hidden inside these polished surfaces was something no one expected. Some of the minerals used in these clocks emitted low levels of radon gas, a danger that could quietly accumulate in the still air of bedrooms where families slept every night. At the time, no one questioned this. People bought them proudly, admiring their weight, their rugged textures, and how different they looked from plastics that dominated the era. They became popular gifts, decorations, and bedside companions for kids and adults alike. For many households, these clocks were among the first things seen each morning and the last things seen each night. It took years before researchers began connecting unusual radon readings in homes with decorative items no one suspected. When the truth surfaced, it came with unsettling clarity. Suddenly, a stylish product meant to bring comfort and personality into bedrooms, instead symbolized an invisible danger drifting through the air. Families boxed up clocks they once adored, unsure what else in their homes might be quietly affecting their health. And today, these stone clock radios remain one of the most unnerving reminders that even the calm glow of a bedside clock can hide risks that take decades to fully understand. During the 1980s, home radon test kits became a booming trend, promoted as the newest must-have tool for families who wanted to stay ahead of hidden household dangers. But early versions of these test kits relied on actual radioactive sources sealed inside their chambers, a detail that most consumers never realized. People placed them in basements, closets, and hallways, following simple instructions printed on the box without any idea that the device itself was introducing a risk. The marketing promised empowerment, control, and peace of mind. Homeowners felt like they were taking part in real science, checking their houses for invisible threats with tools that seemed sophisticated and trustworthy. Yet inside those slim plastic casings was material capable of emitting its own radiation, small enough to go unnoticed but powerful enough to raise serious concerns. Once discovered families left these kits sitting for days, sometimes weeks, believing they were helping to keep loved ones safe. When researchers uncovered the truth, the reaction was swift and uneasy. Regulators banned these early designs and replaced them with safer sampling methods that avoided radioactive components entirely. The shift forced many people to reconsider what they had placed in their living rooms and basements. It was a jarring reminder that good intentions do not always lead to safe outcomes, especially when new technology is rushed into homes before anyone fully understands the implications. And those early radon test kits still stand out as a cautionary tale about the thin line between protecting a family and accidentally introducing something far more dangerous. Electric blankets of the 1980s were the kind of household comfort that felt almost magical during cold nights. You plugged them in, switched them on, and warmth spread across the bed like a soft wave. But inside, many of those blankets ran unshielded wiring that was never designed to withstand years of bends, folds, and nightly use. Families trusted them implicitly, draping them over mattresses, wrapping them around cold feet, and leaving them on for hours at a time. Over time, the insulation around the wires could degrade, exposing live electrical elements that created real fire hazards. Reports of sparks, smoke, and burns slowly began to surface, and investigators traced the cause back to the wiring inside the blankets themselves. When regulators intervened, entire product lines were recalled, leaving families to confront just how close they had come to disaster while simply trying to stay warm. The bans brought new safety standards, temperature sensors, and automatic shutoff systems that are now considered essential features. Looking back, it is startling to remember how casually people once used something that could fail so catastrophically. And today, those early electric blankets remain a powerful reminder that even the gentlest forms of comfort can hide dangers that smolder just beneath the surface. Home fog machines became a surprising hit in the 1980s, especially for birthday parties, Halloween gatherings, and school events where a little theatrical smoke seemed to transform any room into something magical. Kids danced through the mist, parents laughed and filmed with camcorders, and party hosts proudly showed off the machine that made everything feel larger than life. But many early fog machines relied on unsafe glycol mixtures that produced fumes far harsher than anyone realized. These solutions heated quickly, vaporizing into clouds meant to imitate stage effects, but the byproducts clung to carpets, furniture, and lungs. Parents assumed that if a product was sold in stores, it had to be safe for indoor use. Yet repeated exposure in enclosed spaces caused coughing, eye irritation, and respiratory distress, especially for children who spent the most time chasing the swirling clouds. When health experts alerted regulators to the risks, the bans arrived with urgency. Manufacturers were forced to redesign formulas, add safety warnings, and rethink what belonged in family homes. The shift was dramatic, transforming fog machines from beloved party accessories into cautionary examples of how easily entertainment can cross into danger. And today, the memory of those early machines lingers with a mix of nostalgia and unease, reminding us that even the most joyful moments can hide hazards no one sees until it is too late. In the 1980s, the make-and-bacon microwavable tray was one of the decade's quirkiest kitchen gadgets, promising crisp bacon without the hassle of a stove. Families loved the novelty of watching strips hang over plastic bars as grease dripped neatly below. It seemed like the perfect shortcut for busy mornings, after-school snacks, or weekend breakfasts when everyone wanted something fast and satisfying. But the plastic used in these trays was never designed to withstand repeated high heat, and over time, it released harmful compounds that seeped into food. People had no idea that the convenience they prized came with a hidden chemical cost. Parents let kids microwave bacon on their own, believing the tray made the process safer. The smell filled kitchens, the taste felt familiar, and no one thought twice about what might be mixing into those sizzling strips. Reports eventually surfaced about the dangers of certain plastics breaking down in microwaves, prompting alarm among families who had relied on the tray for years. Regulators banned the unsafe formulations, and manufacturers quietly shifted designs. But the legacy of the make-and-bacon tray lives on as one of the clearest examples of how the pursuit of convenience can blind consumers to the risks hiding beneath new inventions. And it reminds us that even the most harmless-looking kitchen toy can carry consequences no one imagined when they first brought it home. Setting off homemade fireworks in residential streets was the kind of chaotic joy that defined warm nights in the 1980s. You would see neighbors gathering outside as soon as the sun dipped below the rooftops, everyone holding sparklers, Roman candles, or something cobbled together from a kit someone found in their garage. Kids would run around barefoot while adults lit fuses with a cigarette lighter, sometimes backing away slowly, sometimes sprinting like their lives depended on it. People trusted that nothing serious would happen, even if accidents were more common than anyone admitted. Today, though, the same act will get you arrested faster than a firecracker can hit the pavement. Cities want permits, states want regulations, and your neighbors want peace and quiet. Setting off fireworks in a residential street is considered reckless endangerment, a fire safety violation, or even a criminal offense depending on where you live. Maybe people were too relaxed back then, or maybe we have become too strict now. Either way, those old fireworks nights remain burned into memory, glowing like embers from a time when danger and delight lived side by side. Tinned fish packed in PCB-laced oil was once considered a healthy, protein-rich option for busy families. Tuna, sardines, and anchovies sat neatly in shiny metal tins, waiting to become quick lunches or midnight snacks. The oil inside kept them moist and flavorful, but it also carried a hidden poison. At the time, convenience was king, and no one thought to question what made those tins last so long on the shelf. Housewives trusted the packaging, the labels, and the smiling faces in the ads that promised ocean-fresh flavor. The irony was cruel. In trying to make food safer from spoilage, manufacturers had filled it with something far worse. Polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs, were used in industrial lubricants and electrical equipment. Somehow, they found their way into the oils used for food preservation, contaminating entire batches of canned fish. PCBs did not break down easily. They accumulated in the body, linked to cancers and reproductive harm. At the time, no one had a clue that a simple tuna sandwich could contain a chemical cousin of motor oil. When the scandal finally broke, it rocked the seafood industry and reshaped how food safety was monitored. Factories were overhauled, regulations tightened, and faith in clean eating took a heavy blow. The sea that had fed generations now carried a warning label of its own. Roller rinks in the 1970s were the ultimate hangout. You had the flashing lights, the disco ball, and enough polyester to start a fire just by walking. But the real wild card? The music. No one blinked when rinks blasted explicit disco tracks over the loudspeakers while underage kids zipped around with sticky slushies in hand. The lyrics were often loaded with innuendo, suggestive metaphors, or sometimes just straight-up raunchy lines. But hey, if it had a funky beat, it made the playlist. It was not about lyrics, it was about the vibe. You had 8-year-olds skating in a circle to songs that would raise eyebrows today at a high school dance. And this was not just some fringe rink in the middle of nowhere. This was normal. Parents sat in the stands eating nachos while Donna Summer or the Village People gave their best PG-13 performance. It was a time before clean edits, before parental warnings, before anybody really asked, "Hey, should we be playing this for kids?" Spoiler alert, nobody asked. But if you think that was questionable, let's talk about what came on the TV while kids were watching cartoons on a Saturday morning, right between episodes of Scooby-Doo and The Jetsons. Asbestos insulation in houses and schools was once hailed as a miracle material. Fireproof, cheap, and easy to install, it was used in walls, ceilings, and floor tiles across America. Schools were filled with it, and homes relied on it for insulation. No one questioned its safety. In fact, it was praised for protecting against fires. Kids sat in classrooms surrounded by asbestos panels, completely unaware of the danger. Maintenance workers handled it daily, stirring up dust that would later prove deadly. The risks were invisible, and that made them more insidious. By the time warnings became widespread, millions had been exposed. Today, asbestos removal is a costly and carefully regulated process, but in the 1970s, it was simply part of construction. What was once seen as progress is now remembered as one of the most hazardous building practices in modern history. Adults bringing open beer cans in cars was the kind of thing that felt like second nature during the 1980s. You would see someone pull up to a friend's house, step out of their car, and casually place their half-finished can of beer on the hood while they straightened their jacket. No one thought anything of it. Road beers were just how things were, especially on long trips or lazy afternoons where responsibility felt like a distant rumor. It is not that people were reckless on purpose, it is that the rules were looser, the judgment was lighter, and the world simply did not carry the same anxious energy that it does today. Somewhere along the line, though, lawmakers got tired of looking at accident reports and tired of pretending that alcohol and moving vehicles could share the same space without consequences. Today, an open container violation is enough to ruin your whole week. You can get arrested, fined, or worse, depending on what the officer sees when they lean in to talk to you. In the past, adults just wanted to unwind after a long day or enjoy the breeze with something cold in their hand, and no one pointed fingers or sounded alarms over it. It says a lot about how differently we live now, how tightly the world holds on to every rule and every precaution. Maybe that is safer, but it is also a reminder that the 1980s lived in a different rhythm, one we will never fully get back. Prepackaged luncheon meats were a post-war convenience that fit neatly into America's new rhythm: busy days, quick lunches, no waste. Sliced, sealed, and ready to eat, these meats were the modern worker's dream. They filled sandwiches, lunchboxes, and picnic baskets across the nation. What no one realized was that heating them could trigger a dangerous reaction. The nitrates used to preserve their bright pink color produced nitrosamines, chemical compounds linked to cancer. Commercials showed happy families eating these sandwiches in spotless kitchens, while factories quietly churned out meats laced with preservatives no one could pronounce. It was the dawn of the convenience age, when speed and shelf life mattered more than nutrition. And like so many mid-century innovations, it took years before anyone asked what we were actually putting in our bodies. For years, people fried or broiled their sandwiches, unknowingly creating toxins right on their stovetops. Once scientists uncovered the truth, the industry was forced to reformulate, and entire brands vanished overnight. Luncheon meat never quite recovered its innocence. What was once a symbol of post-war efficiency became a reminder that convenience can carry a hidden cost. Yep, you heard that right. In the 1970s, you could go to the store and buy a science kit that came with actual radioactive samples. Glowing rocks, uranium ore, the whole radioactive shebang. These kits were sold as educational tools, a way to spark curiosity in young minds. And they did, right before they sparked some very serious health concerns. Back then, no one batted an eye. Parents figured if it came in a box with a smiling cartoon scientist on the front, it had to be safe. Kids were in their rooms waving Geiger counters around like they were playing laser tag, all while absorbing trace amounts of nuclear material. It was science. It was cool. It was totally wild. Of course, by the time the risks caught up to the curiosity, these kits had already found their way into thousands of households. That glow-in-the-dark magic? Yeah, turns out it was not so magical after all. But if you thought glowing uranium in your closet was risky, wait until you hear what people kept in their trucks, in full view, completely unlocked, and nobody cared. Glass soda bottles returned by kids for cash were a cornerstone of everyday life in the 1970s. Families bought soda in heavy glass bottles, and when the drinks were gone, it was the kids' job to haul them back to the corner store or local grocery. Children carried rattling crates filled with glass bottles, clinking together as they walked down sidewalks or pedaled bikes with baskets overloaded. At the store, the bottles were exchanged for a few cents each, turning empty soda into pocket money for candy or comic books. Parents encouraged it, partly because it kept kids busy, but also because it saved money on the next soda purchase. The bottles were reused and refilled, long before recycling became mainstream, which made the system practical and efficient. The danger was obvious, though. Heavy glass bottles cracked or shattered easily, and kids often ended up with cuts or bruises. Even so, it was a point of pride to carry the bottles back without breaking any, and the sound of coins dropping into small hands was a sweet reward. Today, this practice would be considered risky, especially letting children lug around crates of breakable glass. But for those who grew up then, the memory of glass bottles clinking together in the summer heat is unforgettable, tied to independence, responsibility, and the simple joy of earning a little money for themselves. Letting kids ride in cars without seatbelts or booster seats was almost like breathing in the 1980s. You would pile into the back seat with your friends, maybe slide across the vinyl seats as the car turned, and nobody cared that you were bouncing around like laundry in a dryer. Parents were not negligent. They were simply operating in a world that had not yet turned safety into a second religion. Booster seats were practically unheard of, and if you were tall enough to see over the dashboard, you were tall enough to sit wherever you wanted. Today, though, the rules are carved in stone. A child without a belt is a legal crisis waiting to happen, and the idea of letting a toddler roam around the back seat would send modern authorities into a frenzy. But back then, the world felt softer. You believed that a parent's instinct was enough to keep their children safe, and that accidents were just accidents, not court cases waiting to unfold. Maybe we lost something in the shift, something about letting kids feel the world without watching it through layers of caution and regulations. Formaldehyde-laced milk sounds like something out of a nightmare, but in the early 1950s it was a reality for some families. When refrigeration was expensive and spoilage high, certain dairy producers found a shortcut. Add a touch of formaldehyde, a preservative used for embalming. It kept the milk fresh longer, even in the heat. To the average shopper, this was the golden age of trust. If it came in a bottle with a farm logo, it had to be safe. The idea that something so pure-looking could be chemically tampered with was unthinkable. But greed and convenience always find their way into progress, especially when no one is watching. Consumers never suspected a thing, trusting the white liquid poured into their children's cereal bowls. For years, families drank what they believed was the purest symbol of health, completely unaware of the chemical lurking within. It took illness, lawsuits, and stricter inspections to expose the practice. Once the scandal broke, public trust in the dairy industry took a hit that lasted decades. The lesson was clear: not everything that looks wholesome is. Sometimes the most dangerous things are the ones that seem the most natural. Back before Halloween became a yearly anxiety fest, taking unmarked candy from a neighbor was just how the night worked. You rang a doorbell, yelled, "Trick or treat," and got handed whatever someone had lying around. Loose jelly beans? Great. Homemade fudge and wax paper? Even better. The idea that candy needed to be sealed and tamper-proof had not fully caught on yet. No one was worried about needles or poison. Your biggest fear was getting a box of raisins. Parents did not comb through your haul under a flashlight. They just told you not to eat it all at once. The neighbor handing out popcorn balls or wrapped caramels was not suspicious. They were the cool house. Trust was the currency of the neighborhood, and if someone put effort into a treat, you respected it. Now, we wrap everything in layers of packaging and double-check labels like candy is a security threat. And after all that sugar buzz, you already knew where the real party was, under a disco ball, skates on, and lyrics your parents probably should have listened to more closely. Lawn chemicals with few restrictions were sold everywhere in the 1970s. Homeowners sprayed pesticides and herbicides across yards, often with children and pets nearby. Bright green lawns were a source of pride, and no one thought twice about the risks of chemical exposure. Many families saw a flawless lawn as a symbol of respectability, more important than any hidden risks. Kids would roll down hills coated in chemicals, their hands stained green by grass and residue. Even pets drank from puddles on freshly sprayed yards without anyone stopping them. Bags of fertilizer and weed killer came with little more than vague instructions, and protective gear was rarely used. Kids played tag on freshly treated grass, rolled in it, and sometimes even helped parents spread pellets. The cultural push for perfect lawns outweighed concerns about health or safety. Only years later did studies link many of these products to long-term health issues. Today, warnings, restrictions, and organic alternatives are common, but in the 1970s, it was all about appearance. Families remember the smell of fresh chemicals mixing with cut grass, a sensory detail now tinged with unease. Biking in the 1970s was a full-body commitment to chaos. You grabbed your bike, usually a hand-me-down with faded paint and maybe a card clipped to the spokes, and hit the road. No helmet, no reflective gear. Most of the time, not even shoes. Kids would ride barefoot through gravel and glass like they were immune to injury. If you had sneakers on, you were overdressed. The banana seat was your throne, and your kingdom was every cracked sidewalk and pothole-filled alley in town. No one talked about concussions. Helmets were something you only saw in the Olympics or in comic books. You fell, you bled, you got back on. And this was not just a neighborhood thing. Some kids would bike across entire towns to visit friends or buy candy from the gas station. You might have a baseball card flapping in the spokes and a backpack full of nothing but a peanut butter sandwich and dreams. It was reckless, it was wild, and it was glorious. But if you think biking without shoes was bold, wait until you remember how pesticide fog trucks driving through neighborhoods were a surreal but common sight in the 1970s. These trucks rolled slowly down suburban streets, spraying thick clouds of insecticide to fight mosquitoes and pests. Kids treated it like an event, running and biking through the mist as if it were a game. Children pretended they were racing through magical clouds, laughing as the thick fog wrapped around them, never realizing the danger. Parents stood on porches, waving as kids disappeared into the haze, assuming it was safe fun. The chemical smell clung to hair and clothes long after, becoming part of the memory. The sweet, chemical smell hung in the air, and parents rarely worried about what it meant. Communities trusted that if the government sent a truck, it must be safe. In reality, these sprays often contained chemicals now known to be harmful. The image of children laughing as they disappeared into white clouds of pesticide is both nostalgic and unsettling. At the time, it felt magical, like running through fog, but today it is seen as one of the more reckless habits of the era. Letting kids roam malls unsupervised all day was practically the unofficial hobby of the 1980s. Parents would drop you off in the morning, wave from the car window, and trust that you would be exactly where you said you would be, even though you almost definitely were not. You could walk from store to store with a soda in your hand, listen to music at the record shop, play a few rounds in the arcade, and spend hours people-watching in the food court. Today, though, letting a young child wander a mall alone is enough to trigger a welfare investigation. The same freedom that once helped kids grow independence is now seen as neglect. The world is sharper now, more suspicious, more protective in ways that would have baffled an entire generation of parents. Maybe there is a reason for that, maybe not, but that freedom taught kids how to navigate the world on their own 2 feet. It was messy sometimes, and maybe reckless, but it built memories that still make people nostalgic whenever they walk past an old storefront or hear the hum of an escalator. Raw milk was once the pride of the American farm, bottled straight from the source and sold in glass jars. People swore it tasted better, richer, creamier, and somehow more real. In the 1950s, it was still common to see it on grocery shelves, untouched by modern processing. But beneath the nostalgia was danger. Without pasteurization, raw milk carried bacteria that caused tuberculosis, salmonella, and other deadly diseases. Rural families, especially in dairy states, considered pasteurization unnecessary city talk. They trusted their cows, their neighbors, and the land itself. Unfortunately, nature is not as kind as nostalgia remembers. It hides danger even in the things we love most. Families believed they were drinking nature's perfect food, not knowing that it sometimes carried the very thing that made them sick. Eventually, stricter food laws swept across the country, forcing dairies to heat-treat every drop before it hit the store. Raw milk became illegal in most states, a symbol of both freedom lost and safety gained. To some, it was government overreach. To others, it was salvation. Either way, the days of milk straight from the cow were gone for good. If you were a kid in the 1970s, chugging water straight from the garden hose was basically a rite of passage. You would be out playing tag, riding bikes, or building questionable tree forts and suddenly realize you were dying of thirst. No one ran inside for a water bottle. You went for the hose. You cranked the knob, let the sun-heated water blast out for a few seconds, and then put your mouth right on the nozzle. No one asked where the hose had been or what might be growing inside it. Rubbery taste? Totally normal. Mystery specks? Built character. Parents barely noticed unless you soaked your shirt. Nobody thought twice about what kinds of chemicals were leaching from the plastic or whether small bugs had made it their home. We just drank and kept running. But when it came to food, there were rules. Except during Halloween, when those rules took a break and you took candy from strangers with zero hesitation. Mercury thermometers in every home were a household staple. Slender glass tubes filled with shiny liquid mercury sat in medicine cabinets across the country. Parents shook them down with a snap of the wrist and placed them under tongues or arms to check for fevers. Children often marveled at the silver liquid, watching it roll smoothly inside the tube. Some kids even cracked them open on purpose, pushing the beads across tabletops like tiny toys. The shimmering globes split and reformed, sparking wonder instead of fear. Families simply swept them away or flushed them, never realizing the invisible danger left behind. Sometimes thermometers broke, and kids played with the tiny mercury beads as if they were toys. The danger of mercury poisoning was not widely understood, and cleanup often meant sweeping the beads into a dustpan or simply ignoring them. These thermometers were accurate and affordable, which is why they were everywhere. Today, digital alternatives have replaced them, but for families in the 1970s, the mercury thermometer was as common as aspirin. Looking back, the sight of that silver bead climbing the tube is remembered with a mix of comfort and alarm. Hitchhiking on busy highways was one of those everyday 1980s moments that felt wild, free, and strangely normal. You would be driving down a major road, windows down, radio blasting, and there would always be at least one person standing on the shoulder with a cardboard sign or just their thumb out. People did not think twice about stopping either. It was all about trusting strangers, or maybe just trusting that the times were good enough that nothing terrible would happen. The thing is, the government did not see it the same way, not even back then, because transportation laws were already starting to tighten up. Hitchhiking was seen as an inconvenience at best and a danger at worst, but that did not stop half the country from doing it anyway. Today, though, you try pulling over on a major interstate, and you are practically begging for a police cruiser to come rolling up with lights spinning. What used to be a harmless favor or a rebellious night out is now something wrapped in warnings about trafficking, liability, and a whole list of things that did not even exist in the average 1980s vocabulary. People back then just wanted to get somewhere, and if you trusted the person enough to sit next to them, you both pretended that everything was going to be fine. Maybe that was the real magic of it all. The kind of trust you do not see anymore in a world that is terrified of every unknown face. Brominated vegetable oil, or BVO, was the secret ingredient that made 1950s fruit sodas look and taste so good. It kept the citrus flavor evenly mixed, preventing that oily layer from rising to the top. The chemistry was clever, the flavor refreshing, and the bright bottles flew off the shelves. For decades, no one questioned what brominated meant. It just sounded scientific, and science meant progress. But studies later revealed the truth. Bromine compounds did not just disappear. They built up in human tissue, especially fat, leading to headaches, memory loss, and nerve issues. It was found in everything from orange soda to sports drinks, hiding behind harmless-sounding labels. Teenagers drank it daily without a clue that it shared a chemical base with flame retardants. When that fact hit the headlines, even the most loyal soda drinkers turned queasy. The same chemical family used in flame retardants was floating in your orange soda. When the public finally learned, it was too late for many. BVO had been in use for over 30 years. The Food and Drug Administration eventually banned it, leaving soda makers scrambling for safer replacements. Still, those who grew up in that era can probably remember the taste: sweet, fizzy, and unknowingly toxic. In the 1950s, music found its wings with the transistor radio, transforming beaches into personal concert venues where friends gathered, basking under the sun while top 40 tunes played, a soundtrack to youthful summers. This small device brought melodies and voices not just into homes, but into open spaces, making the world feel a touch smaller, fitting snugly into one's hand. Inventors like William Shockley gave us a tool that connected us to the outer world in a manner both intimate and expansive. The radio delivered music, news, and live sports with a static crackle, adding a layer of authenticity to every broadcast. Despite the digital age, radio's essence survives, transformed yet enduring, a testament to its role as the soundtrack of the 20th century. The typewriter, with its rhythmic tap-tap and the ceremonial ding at the end of a line, was the soul of written communication. From Mark Twain to the Beat Poets, it was the instrument of choice for crafting narratives. The introduction of electric models, like the IBM Selectric in the 20th century, was akin to moving from a horse-drawn carriage to a sleek automobile. Yet, the dawn of personal computing in the late 20th century gently ushered this stalwart into the shadows. Still, the typewriter remains a symbol of creativity and nostalgia, cherished by those who yearn for the tangible imprint of ink on paper. Leaving kids home alone as latchkey children was an accepted reality in the 1970s. Parents worked long hours, and childcare options were limited, so kids often came home from school to empty houses. They wore house keys around their necks, let themselves in, and made snacks until parents arrived later in the evening. Television became a babysitter, and frozen dinners filled the gap when kids cooked for themselves. It was not considered neglect, it was simply what families did to make ends meet. Communities trusted that children were responsible enough to handle it, and parents expected independence from a young age. Today, child welfare guidelines and laws would view this very differently, but at the time it was part of growing up. Being a latchkey kid carried a mix of pride and loneliness, teaching responsibility while also reminding kids how much times have changed. Riding in the back of pickup trucks on public roads was almost a rite of passage for anyone growing up in the 1980s. If you lived in a small town or even a suburb with a little more open road, you knew exactly what it felt like to sit on that cold metal bed, holding onto the side rail while the wind tried its best to carry you away. It was not just transportation. It was a feeling. One of those small ways the world made kids feel older than they were. Parents did not question it, neighbors did not blink, and the police did not chase you down for it unless you were doing something truly ridiculous. It was freedom in its purest form. The danger was always there, hiding behind every sharp turn or sudden stop, but people back then shrugged off danger like it was a mosquito. Today, though, you do that once and you will get pulled over so fast your heart will leap out of your chest. Modern laws do not care that it was fun or that it felt like magic. They care that it is unsafe and unpredictable. Maybe that is the part that stings a bit. Nothing gold can stay, not even a childhood moment carved into the memories of an entire generation. Nowadays, everyone buckles in, plays it safe, and misses out on something they never knew they needed. Before you go, tell us in the comments which toxic 80s product shocked you the most. Tap like if this walk through forgotten dangers hit home, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive into the memories we thought were harmless.